It happened in less than 8 seconds. The first shot rang out in the middle of the Geneva Tech Summit, right as Damian Ashcroft stepped onto the stage. One moment, he was the untouchable billionaire, cloaked in power and poise, and the next, he was falling. Chaos erupted. Screams pierced the glass and marble auditorium. People ran, security scrambled. But in the middle of the madness, one woman ran toward the danger. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't tremble. She was in a red volunteer vest, barely noticeable amid the crowd. But to him, bleeding, gasping, fading, she was the only thing he could see. "Stay with me," she whispered, her face inches from his. "You're going to be all right." He didn't know her name. He didn't have time to ask. Because just as quickly as she came, she was gone. The moment she knew he'd survive, she disappeared into confusion, like a ghost wrapped in sunlight. All he remembered was her eyes. Steady, sad, like they'd seen too much beauty and too much pain. They never found her. She didn't claim the reward. She left no record. But she took something with her. Not his wallet. Not his pride. Something much deeper. A small encrypted USB drive that had been in his inner pocket. One tied to the only mystery Damian had never solved. The mystery of his sister's disappearance. And the woman who saved his life had vanished with the last trace of his family secret. For months after that day, Damian couldn't sleep. He told his team to search every aid worker, every nurse, every volunteer on the scene. But she had no ID badge, no last name, nothing. She didn't want to be found, his chief of security said. But Damian, he never stopped looking. Because he knew what he felt in that one impossible moment wasn't just adrenaline. It was something else. Connection, recognition, fate maybe. And if you've ever experienced that instant when the world is spinning out of control and one soul steps into yours with calm, then you know. Some people don't enter your life for a season. They arrive like storms and leave you never the same again. Hello, my beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Chapters of Love, where every story reminds us that the most powerful connections often arrive wrapped in chaos and linger long after the storm is over. Where are you listening from tonight? Are you unwinding after a long day? Sitting quietly with a glass of wine, or folding laundry while dreaming about second chances? Maybe you're simply here for a story that feels like your own. Whatever brought you here, I'm so deeply grateful. Have you ever met someone who left a mark so deep you couldn't forget them? Even if you never saw them again, let me know in the comments below. If you believe in fateful encounters and love shaped by destiny, go ahead and tap that like button and subscribe to join our tender-hearted family. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we feel them. Now, let's step deeper into a love that began with a bullet, a heartbeat, and a woman who vanished without a trace. Before the flash of gunfire in Geneva, before blood met marble and destiny split open in a crowded room, there were just two broken people walking their separate paths. One trying to outrun the past, the other trapped by it. Evelyn Hart didn't believe in fairy tales. Not anymore. Once, she was the kind of girl who read love stories under bedsheets, whispering promises to herself beneath flickering flashlights. But life had a cruel habit of turning pages too fast. By 28, she'd seen more bodies break than most saw in a lifetime. War zones, earthquakes, accidents that left families shattered and hearts barely beating. She had learned to be calm in the chaos. It's why she became a trauma nurse. Chasing adrenaline, living out of duffel bags, running toward disasters, because at least then she wasn't thinking about her own. People admired her sharp mind and steady hands, but they didn't know what kept her up at night. They didn't know about the fiancé she lost, James, a fellow medic whose laughter once made her believe in forever. They didn't know she still blamed herself for the way he died, or how she walked away from their wedding date and never looked back. And they certainly didn't know she was the estranged granddaughter of Evelyn Hart, the legendary art thief whose exploits painted headlines decades ago. She told no one. She trusted no one. She lived like a shadow, moving city to city, mission to mission, heart locked tight behind a fortress of control. But all of that changed with one bullet. And one man. Damian Ashcroft was used to being watched. At 35, he was the ghost behind half the world's cybersecurity networks. A billionaire before he was old enough to rent a car. A man who could move money, ruin reputations, or disappear anyone with a single keystroke. But power didn't stop pain, and intelligence didn't erase trauma. For all his influence, Damian had never been able to find the one person who mattered most. His younger sister, Celeste. She vanished when he was 22. Just gone. No ransom. No body. Just a digital ghost. And a single clue she left behind. A sealed USB drive buried deep in a firewall he still hadn't cracked. He wore her watch every day. A gold timepiece, 2 minutes slow, just like she liked it. It was the only thing that ever made him feel human. Until her, it was meant to be another summit speech. Another stage. Another round of applause for the genius recluse with the haunted eyes and million-dollar suits. But the moment he stepped forward into the spotlight, the world shifted. A gunshot split the air. Then another. Damian dropped to ground, pain lancing through his side like lightning. People scattered like frightened birds, the world tilting on its axis. And then her hands were on him, steady, warm, commanding. "Stay with me," she whispered. Even through the haze, he remembered her voice. It wasn't just soothing. It was familiar, like he'd heard it in dreams long before this moment. Blood on his shirt, her fingers pressed into the wound. Her hair smelled like oranges and smoke. Her eyes didn't panic. They understood. "Hold on," she said, as sirens wailed in the distance. "You're not dying today." He blinked, tried to speak, but the world dimmed, and when he opened his eyes again, she was gone. No name, no ID, no thank you, nothing but the ghost of her touch and the agonizing knowledge that something else was missing. The USB, the encrypted key to his sister's disappearance, had vanished. In the aftermath, his team scoured everything. The summit guest list, medical personnel, security footage. But the woman was a ghost. No one matched her description. She hadn't even signed in with the emergency volunteer crew. Maybe she was planted, his head of security had muttered. No ordinary nurse moves like that. She knew what she was doing. But Damian disagreed. She hadn't taken the USB for power. She'd taken it to protect him. He didn't know how he knew. He just did. And if there was one thing Damian Ashcroft never did, it was let go of a mystery, especially when it smelled like jasmine and fire and made his heart beat for the first time in years. Across the continent, Evelyn watched the news coverage in silence. She knew they'd be looking for her, and she knew what was on that drive, at least partly. Her grandfather had whispered it to her once when she was 15, high on morphine in a hospital bed. The girl, Celeste Ashcroft, she's not dead, child. She's hidden, and they'll kill to keep her that way. At the time, she thought he was raving. Now, she wasn't so sure. The encrypted USB held coordinates, names, and something else. Something that tied her broken past. To Damian's haunted present, she should have handed it over. But the moment she looked into his eyes, she knew. If she stayed, he would be in danger too. So she ran, like she always did, like she swore she'd never do again. But fate has a funny way of rerouting broken hearts. And two strangers, shaped by silence and scarred by secrets, had already shared one unforgettable moment. What neither of them knew was that their paths weren't colliding. They were connected, and what came next would change everything. Damian Ashcroft had never liked being out of control, but in the days following the attack, his world narrowed to a single obsession. Her. The woman with fire in her eyes and blood on her hands. His blood. The woman who vanished before he could ask her name. The woman who took something that didn't belong to her, or maybe did. He barely remembered the ambulance ride, the surgery, the flashbulbs outside the hospital once the media learned their precious billionaire had been targeted. But he remembered her, every second of it, the way her fingertips trembled once, just once, before steadying. The quiet resolve in her voice as she told him not to give up. And then nothing, no trace, no digital footprint. A ghost in a world where even ghosts left data trails. He pushed his team harder. Find her, he ordered. She wasn't just a medic. She knew where to look, how to move. That's not luck. That's training. It wasn't until his head of security came back with grainy footage from a loading dock exit that Damian saw her again, face turned to the side, hair tied back, shoulders tight like someone expecting to be followed, and in her hand, a flash drive. His flash drive, the encrypted USB that had lived in the lining of his jacket for over a decade, a piece of his sister's puzzle. Gone. Evelyn Hart had disappeared before, but never like this. This time, she was running from something, not to something. After the attack, she'd used a burner phone to book passage on a private aid flight out of Switzerland. No records, no luggage, just her backpack, her instincts, and the USB. She hadn't planned to take it. She told herself that 100 times. But when she cradled Damian in her lap and reached for pressure gauze, her fingers had brushed against the fabric of his coat. She'd felt the rectangular outline of the drive immediately. Her brain reacted faster than her conscience. She'd slid it into her palm without a sound. Maybe it was a name etched faintly into the plastic casing, Celeste A. Or maybe it was the way Damian had looked at her, like someone who had already lost too much. Either way, she couldn't leave it behind. Not with the name her grandfather had whispered on his deathbed. Ashcroft. Not with the threads that had started to unravel long before that summit. She knew the drive was more than just files. It was a fuse. In a dusty safe house on the outskirts of Montenegro, Evelyn connected the drive to a secure laptop she kept hidden beneath false floorboards. At first, nothing happened. Then the screen blinked once, twice, and then a puzzle emerged. Not documents, not bank codes, coordinates, interwoven with names, dates, symbols, and a phrase that chilled her blood. The child lives in the light. The sister lives in the dark. She closed the laptop. Hand shaking. Someone had gone to great lengths to encrypt this. Someone had died for it. And if she'd uncovered it so easily, someone else could too. Back in Geneva, Damian's anger simmered beneath every interaction. He wasn't just missing a clue now. He was missing her. Why take it? He asked aloud, pacing his private study. Why save me? Just to steal from me. But deep down, he didn't believe it was theft. It felt more like protection, like she knew something. He began cross-referencing volunteer records from international aid organizations. Red Cross, Médecins Sans Frontières, crisis responders from Istanbul to the Congo. And there, on a list from 3 years ago, he found her, Evelyn Hart, American, trauma specialist, worked briefly in conflict zones before transferring to disaster recovery units. No family listed, no permanent address. And then nothing, like she'd stopped existing after her last recorded mission. Damian didn't smile often, but something like satisfaction ghosted across his face. Got you. Across the ocean, Evelyn stared at a scar on her arm. A faint reminder of the accident that took James. He'd told her secrets were poison. That one day, hers would cost her everything. She hadn't listened then, but she felt it now. With every hour that passed, the coordinates on that drive burned into her thoughts. Each name connected to a thread in Damian's world. His past, his pain, and she was holding it all. She could give it back. But at what cost? Did Damian even know what the drive contained? And if he did, why hadn't he opened it? Unless he couldn't. Unless the only person who could decrypt it was her. Because her grandfather had taught her how. Not overtly, not explicitly, but in codes, in maps, in childhood games that were more than games. She wasn't just part of the mystery. She was a missing piece. That night, Evelyn moved again, burned her false ID, changed her hair, sent a single untraceable message to a contact she hoped still owed her a favor. And Damian? He boarded his private jet bound for Paris, armed with a name, a photograph, and a vow. He wasn't going to let her disappear again. Not when she might be the only person in the world who could help him find his sister. Not when she was already lodged somewhere he couldn't reach. Not in his systems, but in his chest. The jet touched down in Paris beneath a blanket of midnight clouds. Damian didn't wait for daylight. He stepped onto the tarmac with a name on his tongue and a photograph clenched in his fist. Evelyn Hart, the name of the woman who had saved his life, and then disappeared with something irreplaceable. A few calls later, whispers began to thread through the silence. A woman matching Evelyn's description had crossed into Switzerland just 48 hours before. No credit cards, no paper trail. A one-night stay in a nondescript motel near the border, paid for in cash. The room was untouched, the bed barely wrinkled. A single cup of tea left on the nightstand, still warm when housekeeping entered. By the time Damian arrived, she was already gone. Zurich was next. The city gleamed with holiday lights and polished glass, but he didn't see any of it. Instead, he walked the cobbled streets like a man possessed, the photograph burning a hole in his jacket pocket. Evelyn wasn't just a puzzle he needed to solve. She had become the only thread left to untangle the mystery of his missing sister. But Evelyn was watching, too, from behind a frosted cafe window near Bahnhofstrasse. Her gaze followed him. She hadn't expected him to come this far. She thought the encrypted USB would scare him off, force him back into his world of luxury and secrets. She'd underestimated him. She always did that with men. And this one was dangerous for her heart. Her hand trembled around the porcelain mug as she turned away. Time to move again. Every hour she stayed increased the risk for her and for him. Vienna. Damian followed a new lead. A woman had booked a train ticket under an alias he recognized from an old emergency medic roster. One Evelyn had used years ago in the Philippines. It was an old trick one of his own cybersecurity teams had used to hide assets. But to him, it was a flare in the dark. He arrived a day too late. The hostile manager remembered her, said she kept to herself, that she left behind only one thing, a worn copy of the Count of Monte Cristo with pages dog-eared and a napkin tucked inside. Damian unfolded it, scrawled in violet ink. Sometimes escape is an act of love. He stared at the words, his fingers tightening. Was she running from him? Or for him? He closed his eyes, trying to recall her voice in that moment. The way she pressed her hand against his chest after the gunshot, steadying his breathing like she'd known him forever. She didn't just save his life. She branded herself into it. The French Alps. The air grew thinner as he climbed, both literally and emotionally. His sources said she might be working at a remote trauma recovery clinic nestled in a mountain village. Under yet another name. He wasn't even sure what he'd say if he found her. He wasn't prepared for the longing in his chest that hurt more than the wound she'd patched months ago. He stepped into the clinic lobby, heart pounding. But it wasn't her. The receptionist's eyes were kind. She looked at his photo and shook her head. You're not the first who's come looking. He turned to leave, then paused. The receptionist added. She said if anyone ever came asking, especially a man with sad eyes and a silver watch, I should give him this. She handed him a folded note. He opened it slowly, hand shaking. If you're reading this, it means you didn't stop looking. I don't know what that means yet, but I'm somewhere between running and hoping. And if you're still chasing me, maybe you're between the same things. EH. He read it 3 times. And then again, it wasn't a goodbye. It was an invitation. Back in Paris, Damian sat beneath the vaulted ceiling of Notre Dame, the dusklight filtering through stained glass. For the first time in years, he prayed, not for answers, but for the courage to trust again. He had built his life on algorithms and control. But nothing about Evelyn Hart followed rules. She lived in chaos, moved like wind, loved like fire. And he'd built walls too thick to let anything through. Until somewhere in the Pyrenees, Evelyn lay awake on a thin mattress, the USB hidden beneath a loose floorboard. She had read its contents again and again, each time revealing more of a truth that could shatter everything Damian believed about his sister. She wasn't just a medic anymore. She was the key to someone else's pain, and maybe to his healing. But trust had never come easily. Not after what happened to her fiancé. Not after living with a legacy of lies and betrayal. She couldn't risk being loved just to be left again. Still, she remembered his eyes the night he almost died. the way he whispered, "Don't go," even as his body went into shock. And she remembered how her heart had answered, "I don't want to." My dear listeners, would you chase someone who might have saved your life or stolen your future? What would you do if the person you were searching for kept running from you, not out of malice, but out of fear? If this story is stirring something in you, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, your stories, your own chase across distance and doubt. Tap the like button and share this with someone who believes in fate. And if you haven't already, subscribe to join our growing family of hearts who believe love is worth pursuing, even when the path disappears into fog. Now, let's continue, because this love story is far from over. The snow fell in fat, soft flakes outside the safe house windows, muffling the world in silence. Inside, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was coiled, tight, and waiting. Evelyn hadn't slept in 2 days. She hadn't expected him to find her here. And yet, the moment she heard the low rumble of a car engine crunching across the gravel drive, she knew. She didn't move when the door opened. She didn't even breathe. Damian stood framed in the doorway, snow in his dark hair, anger in his eyes. But underneath it, something else. Something fractured. "Where is it?" he asked. His voice wasn't raised, but it landed like a blow. Evelyn turned slowly. "You followed me across 3 countries to ask for a USB? "No," he said, stepping inside. "I followed you because you saved my life, then disappeared, and because you stole the last thing I had left of my sister." Evelyn swallowed hard. "You mean the clue you didn't even know you were carrying?" He froze. "What did you say?" She reached into her coat pocket and placed a small silver drive on the table between them. Her hand lingered on it for just a second too long. "Your sister didn't vanish without a trace. She left something behind," Evelyn said softly. "Something only someone like me was ever meant to find." Damian stared at her. "How would you know that?" She looked up at him, really looked, because the man who knew how to find her was my grandfather. His breath caught. My grandfather was a legend in the underground. He was a thief, yes, but he also knew things. Helped people disappear. Hide from danger. "Your sister?" "She wasn't kidnapped, Damian. She ran." Silence again. Thicker this time. Damian moved to the table, but he didn't pick up the USB. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was lower now. Not angry, just tired. "Because the people hunting your sister are still out there," Evelyn replied. "And now they're watching you. And me. If I stayed, if I told you everything, I was afraid you'd try to save me, and it would get you killed." His eyes flickered. "So you vanished instead." "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "You always have a choice," he snapped. Evelyn stepped back, her chest rising. "No, Damian, I don't." "You walk into danger with bodyguards and helicopters. I walk in with a stethoscope and no backup. My world doesn't come with second chances." He stared at her then, and she saw it, that flicker of recognition, of understanding, of hurt. "I thought you were different," he said quietly. "But maybe you're just like the rest of them. Come close enough to take what you need, then disappear." Her eyes burned. "And you? You were content to run empires and chase ghosts while the only person who could help you stood right in front of you." Damian's jaw clenched. He turned away, then slowly, painfully looked back. "You said the USB is a clue. Prove it." Evelyn exhaled shakily. She crossed her bag and pulled out a small notebook, worn leather, pages curled with use. She opened a page near the back and laid it beside the drive. Encrypted coordinates, hidden behind a false firewall. My grandfather left in a code only I could recognize. The same code he used when I was a child, when he taught me to disappear. She looked up. "He left it for me so I could find her." Damian didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, "And you didn't think I deserved to know that?" "I thought you deserved the truth," she said, "but only when you were ready to hear it. And until now, I don't think either of us were." He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, something had changed. The fury was gone. Only the weight remained. He crossed the room, stopping a breath away. Not touching, just standing close enough to share the ache between them. When this is over, he said slowly, if we find her, if there's anything left after all this, his voice cracked. I don't know what I want, but I know I don't want to lose the one person who looked at me and saw something other than a billionaire with a broken past. Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. I didn't see a billionaire, she said. I saw a man standing in the middle of his pain and still reaching. Damian's throat worked around a reply. He couldn't form. By morning, the safe house was no longer safe. The syndicate had found them. The warning came not through alarms or gunfire, but a whisper. A message slipped through the back door of Damian's encrypted comms, using a code only 3 people in the world knew. One of them was dead. One of them was missing. And the last was Evelyn. They're closing in, she said quietly, eyes scanning the screen, fingers trembling only slightly. We have maybe 12 hours. Damian didn't argue. He simply moved beside her, shoulder brushing hers. It was the first time he hadn't questioned her intel. It was the first time she didn't flinch when he stood that close. Together they packed. Documents, laptops, the USB, the notebook. No time for sentiment. Only survival. The safe house in the Alps became a blur behind them as they took the mountain roads toward Geneva, racing toward the one clue Evelyn hadn't yet cracked. An oil painting, hung in plain sight at a museum in Lucerne. A self-portrait, she explained as they drove, by Adelaine Veron. My grandfather knew her. They used to pass messages through brushstroke patterns, codes hidden in the background of each canvas. Damian glanced at her. The painting in your notebook. She nodded. It wasn't just a clue. It's the key. He didn't ask how she knew. He didn't ask why her family's legacy was a shadow network of forgers, thieves, and whisperers of forgotten names. He just drove. Inside the museum, the air was hushed, a curated silence. No one would have guessed 2 people walking beneath the marble arches were running from death. They found the painting in a quiet side gallery. Small, unassuming, crimson tones bleeding into rusted golds. A woman gazing out over her shoulder, lips parted as though caught mid-confession. She's pointing, Damian said. Evelyn nodded. And the folds of her shawl, that's the cipher. She lifted her phone, scanned the image, then overlaid it with her grandfather's code grid. The translation lit up like fireflies on screen. Coordinates. One more time. But this one, she whispered, this one leads to her. Damian's breath caught. You're sure? She met his eyes. I'm never sure, she said, but this is the closest we've ever come. He didn't speak. Instead, he reached out and took the phone from her hand, fingers brushing hers. She didn't pull away. For the first time, Damian looked at her not as a suspect or a savior, but as someone tethered to him by fate, not accident. Not coincidence, but design. As they stepped back out into the chill afternoon air, Evelyn wrapped her coat tighter. Damian noticed. Without thinking, he removed his scarf and gently placed it around her neck. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like something far more dangerous. Thank you, she said softly. Not for the scarf, but for the trust. He didn't answer. He didn't need to, because in that moment, brief, unspoken, and fragile, they became something new, not just fugitives chasing a ghost, not just protector and suspect, but 2 broken people, choosing, for the first time, not to run from the fire, but to walk through it. Together, the coordinates led them to a monastery. Ancient stone walls clung to the cliffs above Lake Brienz, shadowed by forest, unreachable by car. Damian and Evelyn hiked the last mile in silence, hearts pounding harder than the cold mountain wind. Inside the monastery, time felt suspended. Candlelight flickered along arched corridors. A monk, wordless and solemn, led them to a locked vault built into the floor beneath the library. The moment the hidden latch opened, Evelyn felt it, that subtle vibration of truth humming beneath the world she thought she knew. Inside the vault was a single briefcase. Damian opened it, his breath stilled. It wasn't gold. It wasn't cash. It was paper, documents, letters, maps, handwritten journals. And at the very top, a photo frayed at the edges. His sister, older, alive, standing in front of a house, somewhere coastal, wind in her hair, peace in her eyes. "She got out," Evelyn whispered. Damian lowered the photo, his hands trembling. There was a USB tucked beneath the journals, not encrypted, just labeled in his sister's handwriting. "If you're reading this, I'm already gone." Evelyn watched him closely as he inserted it into his laptop. A video played. There she was, so real, so close. Her voice calm, certain. "I had to disappear," she said. "Not for myself. For you." She explained everything. Their family legacy wasn't just business. It was corruption, blackmail, data trafficking wrapped in polished tech. "I knew the moment I tried to expose it, I'd be hunted, so I made myself vanish. I took the final records and planted them where only someone who remembered everything would find them." She smiled then, faint and proud. "Damian, if you're seeing this, you've done it. You found me, or what I left behind. I hope you can forgive me. I didn't want to break your heart. I wanted to free it." The screen went dark, and so did the room, for a long, weightless moment. Evelyn sat beside him, barely breathing. "She didn't run from you," she said softly. "She ran for you." Damian's jaw clenched, his eyes wet. "And I've spent 10 years turning my company into an empire, not knowing it was built on a grave." He looked down at the stack of documents. This would destroy everything. My board, my reputation. If this gets out, you'd lose your empire, Evelyn said gently, but maybe not your soul. He looked up at her then. No pretense, no armor, just a man at the edge of a choice. And Evelyn, she saw it for what it was, not just about legacy, but about freedom for both of them. He took her hand. Warm, steady. "I'm going public," he said. Evelyn blinked. "Are you sure?" His voice was soft but clear. "If I protect the lie, I become part of it. And if there's one thing you've shown me, Evelyn, it's how to stop running." A silence stretched between them. Tense, sacred. Then, slowly, Evelyn pulled her hand away. "I need to ask you something." His brow furrowed. "Anything. If you do this," she said, "if you expose the truth, you'll lose control. You'll be hunted, discredited. Everything you built could fall apart. And me? I'm still a target. Staying with you means painting a mark on your back, and mine." She stood then, pacing the edge of the room. "I spent my life trying to be invisible, saving people without ever getting close. And then you came crashing into that. Now I have a choice too." She turned back to him. "I can disappear again, go underground, disappear like I was trained to. Or," she hesitated, "or I stay." Damian rose, moved to her with quiet purpose. "What do you want, Evelyn?" he asked. It wasn't a demand. It was a plea. Her voice was steady, but her eyes trembled. "I want something I've never let myself want," she whispered. "Not safety, not control." She looked up at him. "I want truth, with someone who chooses it too." Damian didn't say a word. He simply opened his arms, not to pull her in, but to offer space, to let her choose. And slowly, deliberately, Evelyn stepped into them. No kiss yet, just an embrace. Real, steady, human, and for the first time, not forged in fire, but in truth. They didn't speak for a long time after the truth came out. The safe house, once humming with tension, now fell into a cocoon of silence, broken only by the occasional wind brushing against the frosted windows. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, her shoulders trembling under the weight of everything. The secret she'd unearthed, the danger they'd faced, and the choice that still hovered like a ghost between them. Damian stood across the room, staring at the USB drive in his palm. It was so small, unassuming, yet inside it was a truth that had haunted him for nearly a decade. "She faked it," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "My sister, she was alive this whole time." Evelyn nodded slowly. "And she didn't want to be found. Not by you. Not by anyone." He looked up then, his eyes locking onto hers with something fragile in their depths. "Why did she trust your grandfather?" Evelyn swallowed. "Because he helped her disappear. Because he knew how to vanish when the world had claws." Damian stepped forward, the floor creaking under the weight of his steps. He stopped just before her, searching her face for something she wasn't sure she could give. "And you," he asked softly, "are you going to vanish too?" Tears clung to her lashes. "I want to run. Everything in me is screaming to disappear. That's how I've survived. But Damian, I don't want to survive anymore. I want to live." And there it was, the thread that pulled them together, tangled and raw. He knelt before her, setting the USB down like a relic on the table beside them. "Then stay," he said. "Stay and ruin me if you must. But don't disappear again." Evelyn leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "I'm not afraid of ruining you," she whispered. "I'm afraid I'll ruin this." His hands cupped her face with infinite gentleness. "Then let's ruin it together. Let's build something from the ashes. I'll give you everything, my name, my future, my heart." Her lips trembled as she smiled. And then, finally, she kissed him. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't fiery. It was a slow kind of kiss that reaches deep and stays there. A trembling promise exchanged not through vows but through breath. The kiss of two people who had seen the worst of the world and still found beauty in each other. His arm slid around her waist. Her fingers tangled in his hair. When they finally parted, neither needed to speak. Love had never been louder. 6 months later, the Trauma Recovery Center stood at the edge of the countryside, a quiet structure wrapped in gardens and sunlight. A sign etched in glass read, "Ashcroft Heart Center for Renewal." Damian walked the halls often, not in suits anymore, but in rolled-up sleeves and worn-in shoes. He still advised companies when needed, still invested. But the empire no longer owned him. Evelyn spent her days in quiet sessions with survivors, in rooms painted soft green and filled with light. People healed here, and so did she. One evening, they attended the opening of a restored art gallery in Paris. A gift from Damian to Evelyn. She had chosen every piece. But one painting stopped her cold. A girl with fire in her eyes, hidden in the shadows of storm. His sister. Damian came to stand beside her. "I found her. She wanted to come back, but she needed time." That's her way of saying thank you. Evelyn looked at him, the lights of the gallery reflecting in her eyes. "You gave her a future." He turned toward her fully. "No, you gave me mine." They stood together, beneath the soft glow of the gallery skylight, hands brushing lightly, hearts still learning how to beat without flinching. Evelyn's eyes traced the painting. Damian's sister, painted from memory, fire in her gaze, freedom in her posture. It wasn't about closure. It was about acknowledgement, about facing the truth, no longer hiding from the shadows they carried. Because in the end, this story was never about encrypted files or billion-dollar secrets. It wasn't about the chaos of a tech empire or the bloodlines that tried to define them. It was about something far more intimate, what it means to be truly seen. Evelyn didn't save Damian with a defibrillator or a flash drive. She saved him by staying, by refusing to run when the fire rose. And Damian didn't win her with power or wealth or promises. He won her when he stepped back and made room for her choice. That's the kind of love that heals, not because it's loud or perfect, but because it allows the broken pieces to stay visible and still be held. Hello, my beautiful souls. As our story draws its final breath, I find myself sitting in the quiet with you, grateful, moved, and utterly full. Isn't it something how love often finds us not when we're shining, but when we're unraveling? I wonder, what secrets are you carrying today? What truths have you buried so deep that even love has had to knock twice? Maybe someone has seen through your armor and stayed. Or maybe, like Evelyn, you're still learning that being chosen means being seen completely. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need a reminder that even after all the running, all the fear, love can still stand at the door, gentle, steady, and real. I'd love to know, have you ever loved someone so deeply you gave them the space to leave and they chose to stay? Tap that like button if the story moved you. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I read every word, and your stories mean more to me than you know. And if you haven't yet, I invite you to subscribe and become part of this little family we're building together, a family of hopeful hearts, healing souls, and romantic spirits. Until we meet again in our next chapter, remember this. The strongest love stories don't begin with perfect timing. They begin with the courage to stop running. Wishing you peace, warmth, and all the love your heart can hold, wherever you are in this moment. The chapters of love.